A pregnant woman was rushed to the hospital in an emergency. Her condition was extremely critical. The cause was a blood-sucking vampire attack that left her severely injured. Although the doctors provided immediate treatment, they were unable to save her. However, they managed to save the child in her womb. The one who was rescued was Blade. After growing up, he was determined to become a vampire hunter to avenge his lost mother. One day, the alluring girl seduced the young man to follow her, and he was excited, unaware that he had fallen into a dangerous place without realizing it. The two of them attended a party deep inside a slaughterhouse, a mysterious location that even the police would find hard to discover. The door opened, revealing people dancing wildly to the music. The young man tried to strike up a conversation, but they were strange and distant. Suddenly, a fire hose on the ceiling sprayed a lot of blood, causing the young man to panic. What left him stunned was that the people around him suddenly changed, aggressively lunging at him to reveal vampire-like fangs. Just as they were about to drain the young man's blood, suddenly, a man dressed in black appeared. He was Blade, causing the vampires to flee in haste. Blade didn't say much and directly used his weapon to attack. The blood-sucking demons hit by silver bullets immediately turned to dust. When he ran out of bullets, he switched to using a sword to finish off the vampires. The weakness of vampires lies in weapons made of silver, as well as garlic and animal blood. Just a little contact turned them to ash. The gang leader rushed in, ordering his henchmen to attack. Although they were equipped with armor and weapons, but they were no match for Blade, who quickly dispatched them. Soon he eliminated the entire gang, and the gang leader was hung on the wall. Blade then asked him to send his deepest regards to Deacon, the one who led that place, before setting him ablaze. At that moment, the police arrived, forcing Blade to escape through the sewer. Right after that, the body of the gang leader had been taken to the hospital. The doctors drew his blood for testing, and Karen was astonished because she had never seen such strange blood. The red blood cells were paired, unlike the separate ones found in normal blood. Finding it very unusual, Karen and her colleagues decided to perform an autopsy on the gang leader's corpse for research. Suddenly, the gang leader sprang to life and brutally bit one of the male doctors to death. Still hungry, he chased after Karen to drain her blood. Just as Karen was in imminent danger, Blade appeared and chopped off one of the gang leader's arms. However, the police then showed up, allowing the gang leader to escape. Blade intended to leave, but when he saw Karen struggling for breath, he was reminded of his mother from before and couldn't bear to abandon her. He decided to take Karen with him. The police thought Blade was taking a hostage and opened fire repeatedly. Blade quickly threw Karen across to the building opposite, causing her shoulder to dislocate. He then jumped over to help her readjust it. Afterward, Blade swiftly took Karen to the secret workshop of his adoptive father, Whistler. Whistler injected Karen with a dose of garlic serum to counteract the infection from the poison. Since the poisoning had been prolonged, Karen had only about a 50% chance of survival. If she were to transform, Blade would directly finish her off. At the same time, the vampire elder was discussing Blade's attack from the previous day with other elders in the council. He summoned Deacon to begin a reprimand. For vampires to live normally, the elders had to negotiate with the authorities to avoid causing disturbances, gathering in large numbers, and committing random murders. However, Deacon disregarded these rules and organized the recent event, which led to many deaths within their clan. Unexpectedly, Deacon showed no concern and was rather arrogant. Deacon believed that vampires were a superior species and had no reason to submit to human dominance. The elder reminded Deacon of his status, stating that the members of the council all had pure blood, while Deacon was a half-breed who had been fortunate enough to be allowed in, so he should not be disrespectful. However, Deacon refused to change his ways and was still plotting a dark scheme for himself. The next morning, Karen had fully recovered and had not transformed. She went outside and overheard a conversation between Blade and his adoptive father. To prevent Blade from becoming a vampire, Whistler had developed a serum to help Blade resist the toxin, but Blade still retained the powers of a vampire and immunity to sunlight. However, his body was increasingly producing antibodies against the serum, so each injection required a larger dosage. Seeing Blade in pain on the chair, Karen seized the opportunity to try to escape, but she was quickly caught by Whistler. There, Whistler and Blade informed Karen that the world above ground was merely the tip of the iceberg. The underground world contained truly horrifying things. As soon as Karen heard that the authorities had been corrupted, she abandoned her naive thought of reporting to the police. Suspecting that the bloodsuckers would come looking for her, Whistler instructed Blade to escort Karen home. Before they left, Whistler gave Karen a vial of garlic serum for protection and advised her to hang garlic around her house instead of crucifixes for a pleasant aroma. Under Blade's protection, Karen safely returned to her apartment. Feeling threatened, she hurried to pack her belongings to move back to her hometown. Just then, a police officer appeared, causing Karen to panic. When she realized that this officer was a henchman for the vampires, she grabbed a weapon for self-defense, but he was still human, so the garlic serum had no effect on him. At that critical moment, Blade appeared appeared just in time. He fought against the officer while revealing a truth to Karen. Among humans, there were many who sought the powers of vampires. Therefore, they served the vampires, hoping that one day they would be transformed into bloodsuckers themselves. After taking down the police officer, Blade examined the tattoo on the back of his neck and discovered that he was a subordinate of Deacon. He learned that this henchman specialized in illegally transporting blood for Deacon. Blade continued to interrogate the officer about Deacon's hideout, but the officer remained tight-lipped. Frustrated, Blade was about to punish him when the officer seized the opportunity to escape. However, Blade was not easily defeated. He guessed that the blood transport vehicle was still nearby, so the officer would likely return. Blade and Karen decided to go back to his car to wait for their prey. Sure enough, that evening, the officer appeared and drove away in the blood transport vehicle. Blade followed him to Deacon's hideout. It turned out to be a bustling nightclub where Chinese patrons wearing sunglasses were enjoying a performance by two girls on the dance floor. Blade wanted to get in but was stopped by a bouncer. In response, Blade quickly dealt with the bouncer, taking him down. He then captured the police officer and forced him to lead him into a secret room behind a refrigerator door. Blade released the police officer and, along with Karen, entered the interior. Inside, Blade discovered a massive server room that was operational, undoubtedly related to Deacon. At that moment, Deacon was using an algorithm to translate an ancient vampire text. Despite the Elder's advice against engaging in such a futile task, Deacon paid no heed and finally succeeded in translating it. Just then, the police officer rushed in to report that Blade had followed him into the hideout. Enraged, Deacon bit the officer to death and then ordered his minions to search for Blade and eliminate him once and for all. Meanwhile, Blade located the individual in charge of Deacon's data. This overweight man boasted that he was the king of taking a beating and refused to divulge any information. However, Karen immediately shone a super bright light, causing him to be roasted black. Unable to bear it, the fat man confessed Deacon's secret. It turned out that Deacon wanted to use the sacrificial altar to summon the legendary blood god. At that moment, Blade discovered a secret door. He used explosives to open it, revealing a storage area full of ancient vampire texts. As Blade examined his surroundings, he noticed a shadowy figure darting past. He quickly gave chase and found a little girl. Just as he reached out to help her, she unexpectedly attacked him. However, Blade subdued her with a single move that day, leaving her unconscious on the floor. It turned out that Deacon and his minions had come to capture Blade. Despite Blade's high combat skills, he couldn't fend off all of them at once. Ultimately, one of the henchmen restrained him with rope, and since Karen had also been captured, Blade refrained from taking any rash actions. Even though they had captured Blade, the leader chose not to kill him, but instead decided to entertain himself by torturing Blade. Whistler, who had been monitoring Blade through a mini earpiece, arrived just in time to provide assistance. An explosion disoriented the enemies, allowing Blade and the others to escape outside. Seeing that the leader and his minions were still pursuing them, Blade led Karen to the other side, while Whistler crawled into a sewer to evade capture. However, the henchman, undeterred by danger, leaped over as well, with only the leader managing to make it across. During the fight, Blade managed to sever the leader's hand before quickly grabbing onto an approaching train to escape with Karen. Once inside the train, Karen helped realign Blade's dislocated arm. At that moment, the vampire toxin re-emerged, forcing Blade to inject himself with the serum. This incident revealed Blade's entire backstory to the vampires, as Blade's mother had been bitten before her death, resulting in a genetic mutation in Blade at birth. One time while hunting vampires, Whistler encountered a young boy who was attacking and attempting to bite a human. Whistler rushed in to save the boy and initially intended to eliminate him, but upon realizing that Blade was not a vampire, he decided to adopt and train him. Whistler became a vampire hunter because his wife and daughter had been killed by them. He also informed Karen that the serum he developed allowed Blade to resist the toxin. However, Blade's body had now built up a tolerance to the drug. The next morning, in a bid to ensure his plan's success, Deacon ordered his minions to kidnap the Elder. He ruthlessly extracted 2 fangs from the Elder and then bound him, waiting for the sun to rise so he could burn the Elder's body with its light. As soon as Deacon eliminated the person who always opposed him, he boldly took the seat of the tribe leader. He commanded the selection of 12 pureblood vampires to prepare for the next phase of his plan. Meanwhile, Karen used hospital equipment to create an antidote for Blade. However, the antidote was quite dangerous. Just a touch of it against a vampire's red blood cells could cause it to explode, making it a potential weapon against them. Aware of the risks, Blade decided to inject it into himself anyway. During a patrol, Blade unexpectedly encountered Deacon, who had taken an innocent girl hostage to coerce Blade into joining his bloodthirsty army. Blade rebuked Deacon and then drew his weapon to attack him, successfully rescuing the girl from danger. However, Blade was unaware that this was merely a diversion tactic by Deacon. Deacon had secretly ordered his minions to raid Whistler's hidden workshop, knowing that an old man and a frail girl would be unable to defend themselves. As a result, Whistler and Karen were quickly overpowered, and Dr. Karen was taken captive. By the time Blade returned, it was too late. Whistler, ever resilient, waited for his adoptive son to come back so he could say his final words. From this incident, Blade learned that Deacon's ultimate ultimate goal was to obtain the blood of a non-pure blood vampire to summon the blood god. Suffering from cancer due to a vampire bite and realizing he had little time left, Whistler asked Blade for a gun to free himself. After that incident, Blade's hatred for vampires intensified. He calmly began to prepare weapons and ammunition for the impending confrontation at Deacon's lair, determined to fight to the death. Soon, Blade arrived at Deacon's hideout, silently eliminating the guards on the first floor. As he moved through the premises, he continued to battle, and the antidote Karen had created proved effective, causing the bloodsuckers to explode upon contact. Eventually, Blade entered a stark white room and was astonished to find his deceased mother there. Deacon was just waiting for this moment. He ambushed Blade and revealed a shocking truth. He was the one who bit Blade's mother, and she had become a vampire under Deacon's command. The harsh reality was too much for Blade to bear. Before he could fully process this revelation, Deacon ordered his men to electrocute him, rendering Blade unconscious and dragging him to the sacrificial altar. Meanwhile, Karen had outlived her usefulness and was thrown into a dark basement filled with the bones of executed victims. Instead of succumbing to fear, she calmly used the skeletons to climb her way up. On the other hand, Blade was locked into a stone sacrificial basin, preparing for the ritual. The 12 vampire elders were also forced to stand in position, they ready to drain Blade's blood and transfer it to the elders for the sacrifice. Just as the despicable Deacon was reveling in his success, Karen arrived in time to rescue Blade. She allowed him to drink some of her blood to regain his strength, and Blade's blood flowed through 12 veins up to the ceiling, converging into a single point. After a long period of scheming, Deacon finally obtained what he desired. A bolt of lightning struck suddenly, illuminating the ancient symbols, which absorbed the power of the 12 elders and transferred it to Deacon. Meanwhile, Karen quickly grabbed a gun, intending to disrupt the ritual, but she was blocked by Deacon's henchmen. In a moment of desperation, Karen sprayed garlic essential oil into the mouth of one of her attackers. On the other side, Blade had fully regained his strength. He rushed to meet his mother, but she had now allied herself with the bloodsuckers and had no intention of accepting her son back. In fact, she wanted to eliminate him. Realizing that his mother had changed and was no longer herself, Blade felt compelled to help her find peace sooner. He promised to build her a grand tomb after defeating the vampires as a gesture of filial piety. Having said that, Blade turned to dispatch the lesser vampires, sweeping through them mercilessly. After eliminating the leader, he immediately confronted Deacon. Although Deacon had gained the power of the blood god, Blade possessed superior combat skills. He quickly overpowered Deacon and severed one of Deacon's arms. However, Blade was taken aback to discover that the bastard Deacon had an astonishing ability to regenerate. Since conventional weapons were ineffective, Blade knew he had to think of another way. At that moment, Blade suddenly noticed the vials of serum that Karen had created hanging on the wall. He threw his sword up to knock the vials down and jumped to catch them. Then he slowly forced Deacon to drink from each vial. Initially, Deacon was confident in his invincibility, but after a while, he stood frozen like a statue before exploding. After Blade eliminated all the vampires in the area, he took Karen outside. Karen asked Blade if he wanted to return to being human, but Blade shook his head, stating that he wanted to use the very powers of the bloodsuckers. Not long after, in Moscow, Russia, another vicious vampire began to stir. Hearing a girl's terrified scream, Blade appeared like a god to save her. In a massive blood bank in the Republic, a frail young man with pale skin named Nomak was there to sell his blood. At that moment, a nurse approached to take Nomak to the blood collection room. On the way, the nurse remarked that Nomak's blood was one of the rarest types in the world, and incessantly questioned him about his background. Nomak replied that he had been orphaned since childhood and was currently living alone. As soon as Nomak entered the room, the door suddenly slammed shut. 3 individuals forced him to sit in a chair, their faces twisting into sinister smiles. It turned out they were vampires who specialized in deceiving humans to drain their blood. Unexpectedly, Nomak laughed with delight, his face transforming as he lunged to kill the nurse. The other 2 bloodsuckers quickly met the same fate as the nurse. Afterward, Nomak looked up at the security camera and left a message: "I will hunt down and eliminate all of you." 2 years earlier, Blade's adoptive father was thought to have died at the hands of Deacon, but it turned out he had been captured, transformed, and had survived until now. Blade had promised Whistler that he would not spare any vampires, so he had no choice but to find his adoptive father and help him find peace. At that time, Blade was much stronger than before. He charged straight into the enemy's lair, firing his gun continuously. It wasn't long before the entire hideout was completely annihilated. There was 1 vampire left, and Blade turned to the one with the red beard to ask for the whereabouts of his adoptive father. With the vampire's enthusiastic directions, Blade quickly managed to breach the secret stronghold of the vampires. The lesser guards posed no challenge to Blade, and he destroyed all the blood reserves they had accumulated over the years, leaving not a single drop behind. Blade approached to free Whistler, who was trapped in a solution that prevented his transformation into a vampire. Blade initially intended to help Whistler find peace, but when he saw that Whistler could hardly breathe, he felt a pang of compassion and decided to take him back to his base. At that time, Blade was working with a new partner named Scud, who appeared quite concerned about Whistler because a vampire had once bitten him. Fortunately, Unfortunately, the antidote had miraculous effects. Not only did Whistler revert to human form, but he also regained the robust health of a young man, and his previously impaired legs were now able to walk normally. Whistler was deeply moved to learn that Blade had searched everywhere for him. That night, while sleeping, Blade was startled awake by strange noises. He realized that two intruders had broken into the workshop, dressed in strange, full-body outfits. Blade immediately charged out to confront them, but the two attackers were highly skilled and could hold their own against him. During the intense battle, the opponents raised their hands to signal a ceasefire, stating that they had come to find Blade and had no intention of starting a conflict. They explained that the vampire world was in danger due to a new threatening force that was willing to eliminate both humans and vampires. Assad expressed a desire for Blade's help in defeating this dark power. Initially, Blade was reluctant to agree because he was a vampire hunter, but upon seeing that one of the opponents was a beautiful woman, he changed his mind. Blade was quickly taken to their lair, where he met the highest authority there, King Damaskinos. The king showed Blade the security footage from the previous day at the blood bank and informed him that their enemy was named Nomak, a mutation in the vampire world. Nomak was extremely violent and aggressive, attacking and killing his own kind. Victims bitten by Nomak would also transform into similar creatures, posing a significant threat not only to the vampire clan, but also to humanity at large. Recognizing the danger posed by Nomak, Blade decided to form an alliance to protect the vampires. Their mission would be to track down and confront the bloodthirsty demon Nomak. However, Blade was not foolish enough to fully trust the vampires. He suspected that once the mission was completed, they would stab him in the back, so he had already planned an escape route with his adoptive father and teammate. Meanwhile, Nomak began to execute his plan, instilling fear in humanity by sending hungry minions to tear apart their prey and expand his power. On Blade's side, he wasn't idle either. Nissa, the daughter of King Damaskinos, brought several vampire warriors for Blade to train. Among them was a bald-headed vampire who displayed hostility and challenged Blade to a one-on-one fight. The outcome was clear. The bald vampire not only lost the match, but also ended up with a mini bomb implanted in his head. Blade warned him that if he dared to be disrespectful again, Blade would blow his entire head off. Afterward, Blade turned to Nissa and said he needed to learn more about vampire behavior. Nissa took Blade to a very special place for their kind, called the House of Pain. However, shortly after entering, Nissa was silenced by Nomak, who, instead of killing her, intended to take her hostage. At that moment, Nissa bent down, giving Blade the opportunity to shoot Nomak directly in the head. However, Nomak not only survived the shot, but also recovered quickly. Meanwhile, Nomak's minions charged to attack the vampires outside. Due to their genetic mutations, normal weapons had no effect on them. Even silver bullets fired repeatedly did not harm them at all. Their mouths could grotesquely widen to devour their prey, leaving victims to scream in horror before falling silent. Scud thought he was safe hiding in a car, but he was soon confronted by one of the mutants. While fighting back, Scud discovered that the creatures were extremely afraid of ultraviolet light. When Scud shone a UV light on the mutant, it disintegrated into dust. After dispatching the mutant, Scud rushed to inform everyone that the mutants were vulnerable to ultraviolet light. The vampire army quickly utilized UV rays to counterattack, allowing them to regain the upper hand against the mutant horde. Above, Blade was engaged in a fierce battle with the leader. He found himself at a disadvantage, constantly fending off his opponent's attacks. Just when the situation became critical, the sun began to rise. Despite his mutations, Nomak was also afraid of sunlight and was scorched, forcing him to flee. With the battle over, Blade gathered with the vampires below. One of them had been bitten and was showing signs of transformation. With no other option, they attempted to finish him off with silver bullets, but it had no effect. Blade shot at the ceiling to let sunlight in, which burned the transformed vampire to death. At that moment, Scud entered, followed by Whistler. Scud informed them that the mutant attackers had infiltrated from the roof, which Whistler was supposed to be guarding, leading Scud to suspect him of being a traitor. To prove his innocence, Whistler took everyone upstairs to confront a mutant that had attacked him earlier. The mutant hadn't been able to escape and was burned by the sunlight. Since the mutants were not purebred but genetically altered, after being bitten, they became aggressive and ravenous, but could not survive for long. The group quickly decided to take this specimen back for research. Through this, Whistler discovered that the mutant's bones were very sturdy, with the organs protected inside by the skeleton, making it impossible for bullets to penetrate. The only weak point was to stab from the side, which might hit the heart, but this method was not very promising, as it would be difficult to expose their weak spot, and even if it was exposed, hitting the heart was not guaranteed. Blade proposed an innovative idea. To eliminate the mutants completely, they would need to hunt during the day. Although vampires feared sunlight, they had no choice but to consider this suggestion. At that moment, there was a tattooed vampire in the group who, during the battle, had sustained a minor injury and was beginning to transform, though he was unaware of it. Everyone quickly geared up for the upcoming battle. Before setting off, Scud demonstrated to the group how to use the ultraviolet weapons he had created. When the bomb exploded, it would emit a powerful beam of light that would terrify the mutated creatures as well as the vampires. Nissa also also proved her worth by successfully crafting a trap scent made from the body of the recent mutant, which would lure the hungry minions into the open. Once fully equipped, they began their hunt. In the dark basement, two vampires from the group unexpectedly attacked Whistler. An older man stood no chance against these tall, young adversaries. The bald vampire in front set the bomb, while the one behind aimed to eliminate Whistler. At that moment, the detonator got stuck, prompting Whistler to order him to leave. However, before he could escape, the scoundrel attempting to take out Whistler was suddenly attacked by the minions. Seizing the opportunity, Whistler made a quick escape, but not far into his flight, he encountered the leader. Surprisingly, Nomak did not attack, but handed Whistler a ring, revealing the full truth of the situation. Meanwhile, the tattooed vampire began to show signs of transformation and started attacking his own teammates. Seeing her beloved in such a state, the red-haired woman climbed up to open the manhole cover, allowing sunlight to pour in, and they both faced their fate together. The enemy forces were numerous, and the vampire group was turning on each other, leaving very few survivors. To save the beautiful Nissa, Blade took a risk and rushed to the bomb to activate the detonator. The massive beam of light immediately annihilated countless mutated creatures, and his teammates quickly jumped into the water to escape. Blade found Nissa, but she was gravely injured. In a moment of desperation, he used his own blood to help her, but unexpectedly, both of them were electrocuted from behind and lost consciousness. Even Whistler, who was trying to escape, was captured. When Blade regained consciousness, he found himself locked in a cage with the others. This was the secret laboratory of King Damaskinos. At that moment, Whistler revealed that the situation was far from simple. It turned out that the Vampire King was behind everything. Damaskinos, wanting to prevent vampires from being slaughtered, had altered their genetic makeup, and Nomak, Damaskinos' son, was the first product of this experiment. Although Nomak was not afraid of silver bullets or garlic, he was always in a state of hunger, transformed into a monstrous being. The situation had spiraled out of control, leading Damaskinos to fabricate a story about a dark force to trick Blade into helping him eliminate his deranged son. In addition, Maskinos wanted to use Blade's genes to create a type of vampire that was not afraid of sunlight. Immediately, the bald vampire that Blade had fought earlier shot him in retaliation and also struck Whistler. Although Blade was at a disadvantage, he had prepared an escape route in advance, a tiny bomb that had been planted on the bald vampire's head during their previous battle. At that moment, Scud, Blade's longtime companion, revealed his true colors. He had been bribed by the vampires and had become their mole, and the bomb on the bald vampire's head was just a fake. Scud thought he had outsmarted Blade, but Blade was too perceptive to be fooled. During their time working together, Blade had noticed several suspicious actions from Scud and had planned to wait for this moment to confront him. The bomb that Scud was holding was real, and Blade had anticipated this outcome, resulting in the traitor being blown to pieces. Blade intended to use the chaos to escape, but was soon overwhelmed by the guards and knocked unconscious. When he woke up again, he found himself being taken for experimentation. They restrained Blade's limbs and used sharp metal stakes to extract his blood. After learning the truth, Nissa was heartbroken, especially knowing that his father viewed his children merely as experimental subjects, and decided to leave. Just then, Nomak appeared, catching the guards off guard. Their bullets could not penetrate his incredibly strong skeleton. Meanwhile, Whistler had managed to free himself from his handcuffs and, seizing the opportunity while the bald vampire was distracted, ambushed him. Armed, Whistler made his way through the sewer to infiltrate the laboratory where Blade was in danger. He quickly provided first aid to Blade and attempted to take him to the blood storage room. Halfway there, they were pursued by the bald vampire, who attacked them with a gun. Fortunately, Blade fell into a pool of blood below, replenishing himself. Not only did he recover, but he also became significantly stronger, allowing him to easily fight off the vampires, even with their weapons. Blade swiftly defeated the bald vampire, killing him in no time. Meanwhile, Nomak was not to be outdone. He took down an entire squad of vampires and quickly ran to the rooftop to help his father escape to the underworld. At that moment, King Damaskinos was about to flee, but found that someone had changed the password to the rooftop. It turned out that Nissa did this because she saw Damaskinos as cruel and heartless. As a result, Damaskinos was killed by his own son on the spot. However, unexpectedly, Nissa also volunteered to share the same fate as Damaskinos, to end his family's bloody conflict. Just as Nissa allowed her brother Nomak to bite her, Blade appeared and intervened. Nomak sneered at Nissa before lunging at Blade. Despite his extensive experience in various battles, Blade was no match for a mutated demon like Nomak. He quickly found himself at a disadvantage and was kicked hard, crashing headfirst into the elevator door. Just when it seemed he was about to lose, Blade remembered that Nissa had mentioned the mutant's weak points during her dissection of one. Taking a risk, Blade thrust his weapon into Nomak's side. The blow was fatal, but rather than resenting Blade, Nomak felt liberated. He even pushed the weapon deeper into himself to quickly end his painful existence. After defeating Nomak, Blade rushed to Nissa to help her, but it was too late. He could only honor Nissa's last wish, which was to witness the dawn. Blade carried Nissa to the rooftop, heartbroken, as he watched her fade away in the early morning light. He looked up at the sun in despair. In the Syrian desert, two helicopters suddenly appeared and landed near an ancient temple. The Dracula vampire group quickly entered, and thanks to advanced 3D scanning technology, they soon found a hidden tunnel leading to the tomb of Count Dracula. As the Count lay in peaceful slumber, he was disturbed by his descendants, and in a fit of rage, Dracula grabbed one of them and attacked the others. Meanwhile, a television talk show featured guests who cheerfully dismissed recent online legends about blood-sucking creatures as mere entertainment, asserting that vampires did not exist on Earth. While they debated, Blade was busy pursuing and eliminating the vampire threat. With his martial arts skills, Blade easily took down the bloodsuckers. At one point, a vampire attempted to run Blade over with a vehicle, but Blade reacted quickly, performing a 360-degree jump in midair to evade the attack, and then shot the vampire down. Afterward, Blade swiftly chased after the remaining vampires. At that moment, Whistler's adoptive father drove a truck to support Blade. Blade jumped down from the truck and quickly climbed inside to retrieve his supercar. With his driving skills, Blade swiftly crashed into a vampire on a motorcycle, causing chaos. The other two vampires, terrified, accelerated to escape, even firing shots at Blade, but he pursued them relentlessly. One vampire slowed down to move backward, intending to ambush Blade, but Blade hit the brakes, sending him crashing into the truck. Blade wasted no time in attacking him, and quickly eliminated him. Upon spotting the car carrying the gang leader, Blade turned on the headlights, incinerating the driver in a blinding flash of light. The vehicle lost control, crashing into the median and rolling over. Blade stepped out of his car and shot the gang leader, but he was taken aback to realize that it was a human and not a vampire as he had expected. This was a trap set by Danica to ensnare Blade in legal trouble. As a result, a black man killing multiple people on the street caused a scandal on social media, and Blade soon found himself being relentlessly pursued by the FBI. Meanwhile, the progenitor of the vampires was brought back to their lair by Danica. The prey stood before her, and Danica was delighted, unable to resist the enticing scent of fresh blood. She wanted Count Dracula to eliminate Blade, but Dracula dismissed the affairs of his descendants as irrelevant and slapped her for daring to give orders to her superior. However, he found it interesting that Blade had the ability to adapt to sunlight. After the street killings, news about Blade spread rapidly through the media, while the police believed that the vampires declaring war on humanity was merely the delusion of someone. They considered Blade's actions as criminal behavior that needed to be apprehended and prosecuted. That night, a group of vampires was setting up to hunt, targeting a young mother who had just emerged from the subway. Instantly, the pack of bloodsuckers sprang into action, thinking they would get a taste of fresh blood. However, they soon discovered that the baby was fake and the woman was actually a vampire hunter. She quickly shifted into battle mode and annihilated the vampire group. At the same time, the FBI had tracked down Blade's location and sent agents to surround him. Blade and Whistler fought back, but the enemy's firepower was too strong, forcing the two to flee for their lives. Driven to a dead end, Whistler had no choice but to erase all the important data from the system and decided to blow up his workshop. The large explosion left the police unable to escape. Blade waited for his adoptive father at the dock, and when he witnessed Whistler being consumed by the fierce flames, it broke his heart and rendered him speechless. Because of this, Blade lost all desire to fight and sat still, allowing the police to arrest him. They quickly took Blade to the FBI headquarters for questioning. In the interview room, no matter how the interrogator pressed him, Blade refused to utter a word. Frustrated, the inspector ordered a psychologist to enter the room and administer a tranquilizer to Blade. At that moment, Blade realized that the doctor and several other FBI officers were actually minions of the vampires. They had long since sold their souls to the devil. Just as Blade was drifting off under the effects of the sedative, Danica's men in uniform walked in. Danica intended to give the order to kill Blade when suddenly a stranger burst in. He shoved something containing blood into Blade's mouth to revive him while using his other hand to shoot at the vampires. Danica immediately recognized him as Hannibal, another vampire hunter. Hannibal was indeed formidable, able to take on the entire group of demons by himself, forcing them to struggle just to corner him against the door. Taking advantage of the moment, Blade managed to free himself from the handcuffs and charged at the vampires to assist Hannibal. Together, Blade and Hannibal fought fiercely against the vampires, making their way through the chaos. As they burst into the hallway, they encountered a beautiful female warrior. She was the same woman who had disguised herself as the young mother in the subway the night before and was part of Hannibal's team. However, it wasn't just vampires they faced. There were also FBI officers who quickly sealed off the building to capture all three of them. Fortunately, Hannibal's other teammates arrived just in time in a vehicle to help them escape. In the car, Blade learned that the beautiful warrior was Abigail, Whistler's daughter. Abigail wanted to carry on her father's legacy by forming an alliance against vampires. She took Blade to her hive-like base and introduced him to other vampire hunters, including a weapons master and an inventor working on a new serum system. All expressed their admiration for Blade and their desire to be led by him in the upcoming battles. Blade thought that these individuals were still too young and lacked experience in fighting vampires, but with Whistler gone, he reluctantly agreed to accept them as his allies in the quest to save the world. Among them, Hannibal was the most unique. He had once been a vampire minion and was a former lover of Danica, Danica, making him well acquainted with the enemies they faced and their organizational structure. Danica had a brother named Asher, and the two were inseparable, always together. They also had a large, formidable minion named Jarko, who was difficult to defeat. After learning that they were heading to Syria to awaken Dracula, Blade found it laughable, believing that the progenitor of this vampire clan could not possibly still be alive. At the same time, Summerfield was researching a new biological weapon capable of exterminating all vampires. Dracula's blood was a crucial sample for enhancing the weapon's effectiveness, so Abigail hoped that Blade, with his experience, could retrieve some blood from Dracula. Blade suggested that the best way to lure and capture a vampire was to torment their minions. After stating this, he quickly took everyone around to eliminate the minions of the bloodsuckers. These minions were mostly humans who, in their desire to sell their souls for power, were quite weak. After some time, Blade's team finally succeeded in infiltrating the workplace of the psychiatrist Vance. However, instead of finding Vance, they encountered Count Dracula. Hannibal, wanting to prove himself, charged forward to make a name for himself, but with Dracula's nearly 4,000 years of lifespan, Hannibal was quickly subdued with ease. Blade burst through the door from outside to rescue Hannibal, but was cautious not to act recklessly. Knowing he couldn't win, Dracula injured Hannibal and swiftly made his escape. Blade hurried after the vampire progenitor, chasing him up to the rooftop of a building. When he realized that Dracula had taken a child hostage, Blade was forced to stop. Dracula, benefiting from the bloodline of the vampire lord, was not afraid of being burned by sunlight. He began to ramble about his accomplishments over the thousands of years and the achievements he had made, then tossed the child back to Blade before vanishing. It was clear that Dracula was plotting something that Blade could not yet fathom. Thus, Blade decided to capture the police captain, who was a minion of the vampires, to interrogate him for information. On the surface, the police officer appeared tough, but in reality, he was very weak. Faced with Blade and Abigail's intimidation, he obediently revealed that they were researching vampire blood, which involved many innocent people being kidnapped to drain their life force. All of them had suffered brain death, and their only use was to serve as mobile blood bags for the vampires. Seeing such a brutal and cruel scene, Blade lost control and shot the police chief dead, then ordered the operator to stop all the machinery. While Blade and Abigail were wreaking havoc at the blood research facility, Dracula and his followers launched an attack on the hive base. Due to the overwhelming difference in numbers and combat abilities, most of the warriors were swiftly eliminated. Hannibal and the young girl, Gide, were hiding under a table, then Dracula captured them. By the time Blade and Abigail returned, it was too late. The demon Dracula had left a message written in the blood of the slaughtered, filled with taunts. Upon seeing her best friend Summerfield tortured to death, Abigail could no longer contain her pain. To strengthen their group's combat capabilities, Abigail contacted Calder for assistance. Just before her death, Summerfield successfully developed a biological weapon capable of destroying vampires. Sensing that this day would come, he transferred all the necessary data and a small amount of the serum to Calder, reminding everyone that the serum had not yet been tested. Therefore, if they were to use it, they should add a bit of Dracula's blood to enhance the weapon's effectiveness, although the serum would also affect Blade himself. After preparing the weapons and the necessary serum, Blade and Abigail rode a combat motorcycle straight to the enemy's lair to rescue their teammates and eliminate the bloodsuckers. Meanwhile, Hannibal was being tortured both mentally and physically, but for someone as strong as Hannibal, such things meant little. When he noticed tiny dust particles in the air, making it hard for the vampires to breathe, Hannibal wore a dangerous expression and said to his former lover, Danica, "My teammates won't abandon me, they'll come to rescue me." Just as he finished speaking, nothing happened, but at that moment, as the vampires smirked in mockery, Blade leaped down from the rooftop. He landed lightly and kicked one of them, sending him flying out the window. Seeing this, the other two vampires panicked and ran for their lives. However, Blade did not unlock the gate for Hannibal. Instead, he charged outside, taking down the guards to loosen up his muscles, maintaining his usual style of striking fast and finishing quickly. The vampires charged toward Blade like moths to a flame, and one by one they fell, each shot from Blade resulting in another death. Meanwhile, after being rescued by Abigail, Hannibal stealthily sought out Danica to reminisce about the past. Unfortunately, he encountered Dracula's genetically mutated dogs, but Hannibal cleverly tricked them into jumping out the window, leading to their demise. However, Hannibal became overconfident and backed up, accidentally falling into the room where he had just been imprisoned. There, he faced a blonde-haired foe. In terms of size and strength, Hannibal was clearly outmatched and was quickly beaten mercilessly. By chance, Hannibal was thrown right next to a vial of mercury. He immediately stuffed it into the mouth of the blonde adversary, resulting in the enemy being burned to ashes. On the other side, Abigail was holding her own, capable of taking down many enemies by herself. Furthermore, she rescued the young Gede and brought her to safety. Afterward, she quickly returned to the battle, positioning herself on high ground and using her bow to support cover for Blade. Blade was in a fierce battle with Dracula. Neither of them needed many words as they charged at each other aggressively. With years of combat experience, Blade was able to hold his own against the vampire progenitor, even forcing his opponent opponent to reveal his true form as a grotesque horned monster. In that form, Dracula's strength surged to the point where Blade couldn't defend himself, let alone counterattack. Blade quickly got overpowered by Dracula, slammed to the ground, and then dragged away. From above, Abigail saw that Blade was in danger. She quickly shot an arrow containing the biological weapon at Dracula. He easily caught the first arrow, but Abigail refused to give up and fired a second arrow, successfully hitting Dracula. Seizing the opportunity, Blade grabbed a vial of serum and stabbed it into Dracula's abdomen. The virus immediately invaded Dracula's body, causing the demon to vaporize into thin air. Meanwhile, Hannibal was being restrained by Danica when suddenly the virus in the air attacked her. Danica writhed in pain for a moment before disintegrating into dust. By the time the police arrived, they found only the ashes of the vampires and Blade lying unconscious on the ground. However, that body quickly transformed into Dracula. It turned out that while the virus was vaporizing, Blade remained unaffected, and since Dracula had no interest in being resurrected, he had come to realize that Blade represented the future of their kind. As a final gift, he helped his descendant escape the police's pursuit. At the end of the film, Blade remained a vampire hunter, continuing his career of exterminating the vile blood-sucking monsters.